What if 2025 is not about proving them wrong, but about finally honoring yourself? What if this is the year you stop betraying your own promises? You've watched the videos, felt the fire, cried the tears, and still you're here, breathing, listening. That means the story isn't over. The real question is not a can you do it? The question is a will you stop quitting on yourself? Because deep down, you already know the truth. You don't need permission. You don't need approval. You owe it to yourself. There comes a moment in every person's life when motivation alone is no longer enough. When the speeches, the quotes, the music, and the hype stop working. That moment is not a failure. It is a signal. A signal that your mind is asking for something deeper than inspiration. It's asking for identity. It's asking for commitment. It's asking you to decide who you are when nobody is watching and nobody is clapping. You owe it to yourself because you've already been through too much to stay the same. You survived days that should have broken you. You carried emotional weight that nobody saw. You smiled when your mind was tired and your heart was heavy. Psychology tells us that resilience is not built in comfort, it is built in struggle. And if you are still here, it means your brain and your spirit already know how to endure. Now it's time to learn how to dominate. 2025 is not just another year on the calendar. It is a psychological reset, a chance to reprogram the patterns that kept you stuck, the fear that made you play small, the habits that kept you distracted, the self-talk that quietly convinced you that you were not ready yet. Readiness is a myth. Growth happens in motion, not in waiting. You owe it to yourself to stop living according to old limitations. The brain is plastic. It adapts to what you repeatedly do. If you keep showing up tired, you'll become tired. If you keep showing up disciplined, you'll become disciplined. Confidence is not something you're born with. It's something your brain develops when it sees you keep promises to yourself. This is not about being perfect. This is about being consistent, about waking up and saying, I may not control everything, but I control my effort. About understanding that pain is temporary, but regret rewires the brain for years. In 2025, you are not chasing success, you are building self-respect. And when you respect yourself, everything else begins to align. You owe it to yourself to stop negotiating with your potential, because every negotiation you make with fear quietly trains your brain to settle. Psychology tells us that the mind learns through patterns, not intentions. It does not care what you want to become, what you repeatedly practice. Every time you say, I'll start tomorrow, your brain records a lesson. Delay is acceptable. Every time you choose comfort over challenge, your nervous system learns to avoid growth. Over time, this doesn't just affect your results, it reshapes your identity. You don't just feel stuck, you begin to see yourself as someone who always waits. Potential is not a gift, it is a responsibility. And responsibility is heavy. That's why most people bargain with it. They say, let me heal first, let me get motivated first, let the situation change first. But the hard truth is this: growth rarely begins when you feel ready. Growth begins when you decide that staying the same is more painful than changing. No. Your brain is wired to protect you from discomfort, not to push you toward greatness. So when you wait for confidence, motivation, or perfect conditions, you are asking your brain to do something it was never designed to do. You owe it to yourself to interrupt that pattern. The moment you take action despite fear, something powerful happens neurologically. The brain releases evidence. It says, I acted while scared. That evidence builds self-trust. Self-trust is stronger than motivation because it is rooted in proof, not emotion. Motivation says, I feel like it today. Self-trust says, I've done hard things before and I can do them again. That shift is where real confidence is born. Negotiating with your potential also keeps you tied to your past. You start measuring today's effort by yesterday's failures. You say a last time didn't work, so why try again? But psychologically, the brain cannot move forward while constantly scanning the past for validation. When you replay old losses, your nervous system stays in survival mode. Survival mode is good for emergencies, but terrible for growth. It makes you cautious, small, and reactive. To unlock potential, you must move from survival to intention. That requires decisive action, not overthinking. You owe it to yourself to understand that discipline is not punishment, it is freedom. When you choose discipline, you reduce decision fatigue. You no longer argue with yourself every morning about whether to show up. You simply do. This creates mental clarity and emotional stability. The brain loves certainty. Discipline provides it. And with certainty comes momentum. Momentum is what separates people who talk from people who transform. Every time you show up when it's uncomfortable, you send your brain a new message. I am not who I used to be. Identity shifts slowly, but it shifts surely. One workout, one focused hour, one honest conversation, one day of not quitting. These moments may feel small, but psychologically, they are massive. They rewrite the story you tell yourself about who you are. You owe it to yourself because no one else can pay this price for you. No speech, no mentor, no video can replace consistent action. Inspiration can light the fire, but discipline keeps it burning. In 2025, stop negotiating. Stop asking for permission. Stop waiting for the fear to leave. Act while it's still there. Because the moment you do, you are no longer a person with potential. You become a person in motion. You owe it to yourself to outgrow the excuses that once protected you, because what once saved you can eventually sabotage you. Psychologically, excuses often begin as survival tools. They help us make sense of pain, rejection, trauma, and unfair circumstances. They give the mind a story that reduces guilt and shame. And in moments of crisis, those stories are necessary. But the danger begins when survival stories turn into identity stories. When "this is what happened to me" quietly becomes "this is who I am." Your brain is a meaning-making machine. It constantly searches for explanations, and once it finds one that reduces discomfort, it clings to it. Blame, victimhood, and justification feel good in the short term because they protect the ego. They tell you, it's not your fault. But in the long term, they steal your power. Because psychologically, power only exists where responsibility lives. The moment you give all responsibility to the past, to people, or to circumstances, you also give away control over your future. You owe it to yourself to make a mature shift from explanation to ownership. Ownership does not deny what happened to you. It does not minimize the pain or pretend the wounds were small. Ownership simply says, this hurt me, but it will not run me. That single sentence rewires the way your brain approaches challenge. Instead of reacting emotionally, you begin responding intentionally. Instead of asking, why did this happen to me? You ask, who do I become because of it? Excuses keep the nervous system trapped in defense mode. Defense mode is reactive. It scans for threats, comparisons, and injustices. Growth, however, requires creation mode. Creation mode asks different questions. What can I build? Or what skill can I develop? Or what habit can I change today? When you let go of excuses, you calm the nervous system, you stop fighting reality and start shaping it. This is why high performers talk about acceptance so often. Acceptance is not weakness. It is psychological clarity. You owe it to yourself to understand that responsibility is not blame. Blame looks backward. Responsibility looks forward. Blame says, this happened because of them. Responsibility says, given what happened, what will I do next? That shift is everything. The brain feels empowered when it sees options. Responsibility creates options. Excuses eliminate them. When you believe you have no control, your brain reduces effort to conserve energy. When you believe your actions matter, effort increases naturally. Outgrowing excuses also means releasing the need for validation. Many people hold on to excuses because they fear judgment. They want understanding, sympathy, and approval. But approval does not build strength. Respect does. And self-respect is born when your actions align with your values, not when your pain is acknowledged by others. The strongest people are not those with the easiest stories. They are those who refuse to let their story limit their standards. You owe it to yourself to stop waiting for life to be fair before you become fierce. Life was never designed to be fair. It was designed to test, and tests reveal character. Every time you choose responsibility over excuses, you reclaim a piece of yourself. You move from powerless to capable, from stuck to progressing, from surviving to leading your own life. In 2025, let the excuses retire. Thank them for how they protected you in the past. Then release them, because the next level of your life does not require justification. It requires courage, ownership, and the willingness to rise without permission. You owe it to yourself to demand more from your habits than from motivation, because motivation was never meant to carry the weight of your future. Motivation is emotional. It rises when things feel exciting and disappears when things feel heavy. Psychology shows us that emotions are temporary signals, not reliable systems. If your growth depends on how you feel, your progress will always be unstable. But habits operate on a deeper level. They live in the brain's automatic pathways. Once formed, they require less emotional energy and more consistency. That is why habits, not hype, create transformation. Your brain is designed to conserve energy. It looks for shortcuts, routines, and patterns that make life predictable. When you build intentional habits, you work with your brain instead of fighting it. You remove daily negotiations. You don't ask yourself whether to show up. You already decided. This reduces decision fatigue, which is one of the biggest psychological killers of discipline. The fewer decisions you argue with yourself about, the more mental energy you free for focus and creativity. You owe it to yourself to stop waiting for inspiration to arrive before you act. Inspiration usually comes after action, not before it. When you take consistent action, the brain releases dopamine as a reward for completion. That dopamine reinforces the behavior. Over time, what once felt difficult begins to feel normal. This is how identity shifts. You stop saying, "I'm trying to be disciplined," and start saying, "This is just what I do." The brain believes what it repeatedly experiences. Habits also build self-respect, and self-respect is the foundation of confidence. Confidence is not loud, it is calm. It is the quiet knowing that you will do what you said you would do, even when no one is watching. Every completed habit is a vote for the person you want to become. Miss enough votes, and doubt grows. Cast enough votes, and belief becomes unshakable. This is not motivation, this is evidence. You owe it to yourself to create structure because structure creates freedom. Many people resist routines because they think routines limit creativity. In reality, routines protect creativity. When your basics are handled automatically, sleep, movement, focus, learning, your mind has space to think bigger. Chaos drains mental energy. Structure restores it. High performers don't have more motivation than others. They have better systems. Your habits also regulate your emotional state. Consistent sleep stabilizes mood. Regular movement reduces anxiety. Focused work builds competence. These are not inspirational ideas. They are neurological facts. When your habits are aligned, your nervous system feels safe. When the nervous system feels safe, you perform better under pressure. This is why discipline often feels like confidence from the outside. It's not personality, it's preparation. You owe it to yourself to start small but stay consistent. The brain resists drastic change but adapts beautifully to gradual repetition. One focused hour a day can outperform 10 chaotic hours fueled by motivation. One honest habit practiced daily can outperform a perfect plan never executed. Consistency compounds silently. You don't feel it at first, but one day you look back and realize you are no longer the person who struggled to start. In 2025, stop asking, "Do I feel like it?" Start asking, "What does my system require today?" Motivation will come and go. Life will rise and fall, but habits will anchor you. When your habits are strong, you don't need to be hyped. You are grounded. And when you are grounded, you don't chase success. You become inevitable. This is the moment where everything you've heard stops being information and starts becoming a decision. Because motivation without movement is just noise, and inspiration without execution is entertainment. You did not listen to this to feel good for a few minutes. You listened because something inside you is tired of repeating the same year with a different calendar. You are tired of knowing what to do but not doing it. And that frustration is not a weakness. It is proof that you were built for more. You owe it to yourself to stop underestimating the power of one committed decision. Not a perfect plan, not a dramatic transformation overnight. One decision to no longer betray your own potential. Psychology tells us that identity is shaped by what we do consistently, not what we promise occasionally. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, even a small one, your brain releases trust, and trust changes how you see yourself. You stop asking, "Can I do this?" and start saying, "I don't quit." In 2025, you are not chasing motivation. You are choosing alignment. Alignment between who you say you want to be and what you do when it's uncomfortable. Alignment between your goals and your habits. Alignment between your values and your actions. When alignment is present, discipline no longer feels like punishment. It feels like self-respect. And self-respect is the strongest fuel you will ever have. You've been waiting for the fear to disappear, but fear doesn't leave when you wait. It leaves when you move. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to act while fear is still in the room. Every step you take forward teaches your brain that fear is not fatal. That lesson alone can change the trajectory of your life. Because once fear loses its authority, excuses collapse and confidence rises naturally. You owe it to yourself to remember that your past does not need your permission to stay where it is. You don't have to relive it to learn from it. You don't have to explain it to be free from it. The only thing the past should give you is wisdom, not identity. In 2025, you are not a product of what happened to you. You are a product of what you choose next. There will be days when you are tired, days when you doubt yourself, days when progress feels invisible. Those days do not mean you are failing. They mean you are human. The difference now is that you don't stop on those days. You show up anyway. You do the work anyway. Because discipline is not about intensity. It is about consistency. Always wins over time. You owe it to yourself to stop looking for external validation. Applause fades. Opinions change. But the pride you feel when you keep your word to yourself stays. That pride becomes confidence, that comes momentum. And that momentum carries you further than motivation ever could. So let this be the year you stop negotiating, the year you stop explaining, the year you stop waiting. Let 2025 be the year you become someone you respect. Someone who shows up, someone who finishes, someone who doesn't need permission to grow. You owe it to yourself. Not someday, not next year. Out.